Start. So welcome to this virtual Startup Tuesday, The Hague. It's been already quite a few months since we've been doing this online events. I'm not sure. Well, at least I don't like it. The Humanity Hub is well, first and foremost a space with an event space, and last year this time we had almost every evening something buzzing here in the cafe. And this online world is something that, of course, very important. And of course, it's very useful to be able to connect to some of you that are probably not even in The Hague or the Netherlands. But at the same time, virtual events, at some point, it's a little bit too much. So hopefully very soon, and these days in the news, you have quite some good news. Hopefully very soon, we will be able to open the doors again to physical events. So my name is Alexandre Taillandier. I'm the community manager here at the Hub. And this is the part where usually I ask people to, raise their hand if they have been to the Hub before, if they know about the Humanity Hub. That's not really possible here. So I'm going to say a few words about the Hub. As you all know, the Hub, the Humanity Hub, is in The Hague. And The Hague is the International City of Peace and Justice. So you have hundreds of organizations in The Hague working on all sorts of themes and topics that relate to peace and justice, making this world a better place. And 2.5 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago maybe, the city of The Hague, the municipality realized that there was, that they needed to create something like the Humanity Hub. They realized that all these organizations, this diversity in this ecosystem, needed an actor or a hub to connect all of them. So to basically create bridges between all these diverse organizations. And this is how the Humanity Hub came to be. First and foremost, as I mentioned, we are a space. This is the building. You can also see it behind me in my virtual background. Center of The Hague, not far from the central station, just in front of the municipality. We call ourselves a home to a community of innovators in the fields for a more peaceful and just world. The Hub, the Humanity Hub, is at the core an activities managed community. We have hundreds of organizations here in The Hague, and many of these are part of this community already. And you can see here this extreme diversity, not just in terms of types of organizations such as NGOs, small and large, but also international organizations, tech startups, social enterprises, knowledge institutes, and so on. You probably recognize here a few organizations. And 3 of these are here with us tonight. So what do we concretely do? We facilitate the entry into the Hague ecosystem for newcomers, be it from somewhere else in the Netherlands, be it from people starting their new venture, or from abroad, these days specifically from the UK. We act as a catalyst for connection and collaboration, bringing more connection and collaboration in this very diverse ecosystem, as I mentioned. We enable the exchange of knowledge and expertise within that ecosystem, and we support the development of innovative programming and events, such as this one. As I mentioned, physical space as well, co-working and office space, meeting and event space. Some of these organizations, some of these members have a residency at the Hub. They can access the co-working space or rent a private office. That was it from my side. You can visit us or find out more at thehumanityhub.net and learn more about the Startup Tuesday event series, which let me tell you maybe a little bit more about it as well, since you're here for that. Startup Tuesday is an event series that was created by different innovation hubs around The Hague, the Humanity Hub being one of them. The Hague has also the Hague Security Delta, the Hague Tech, World Startup, among others. And together we decided, we thought it would be interesting to have every single Tuesday in The Hague a Startup Tuesday event. This, of course, didn't really work over the last few months because of the pandemic, but the intention is still there, and we're still doing this virtually. So have a look at the website. We have some other events coming up. And if you'd like to drop me a line, my complicated name, or easier, hello@humanitarian.net. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the speakers of tonight. Let me just try to stop sharing my screen. Exactly. So we have Emma Lindley from AIID, calling in from the UK, if I'm not mistaken. We have Claire Barnhorn from Solvos. She's right here at the hub with me in one of our call booths. I can see the backgrounds, the familiar backgrounds. And Alex Carl from Our Loop as well, calling in from the UK. And I think these speakers have presentations and that they would like to share, and we shall start with Claire.
Yes, I found an unmute button. Welcome, good evening for everybody. I'd like to ask Nabil if he can start a little video that explains Solvos, the social enterprise that I'm a founder of and a CEO. And then I'll tell you more about the journey, how I've come to set up Solvos and what's the story behind it. So please, Nabil, if you can start a little video.
This is Anne, a procurement manager of a non-profit. Anne is building a clinic in a remote area in Kenya and looking for power supply. With generators, solar, wind and biomass, the options are endless. Anne is not an energy specialist and spends a lot of time in screening options. Anne is getting stressed as she also needs to procure clinical equipment and sanitation infrastructure. She normally hires consultants to make these choices. With the Solvos platform, Anne can select the right solutions and connect to many suppliers. Solvos even provides her with possible requirements for the power supply she's looking for. The platform offers responsible solutions as packages, including services like maintenance and spare parts. Once she's selected a solution package, it's just one click for Anne to tender on solvos.com. Local and international suppliers automatically get an invitation to bid. Anna is happy with the many competitive bids and the offered solutions that really meets the needs of the clinic.
Thanks. Let me share my screen. So you just saw a little video explaining Solvos, but as was announced for this presentation for Startup Tuesday, what's the journey that has led me to launch Solvos and set up Solvos, a responsible procurement platform in the humanitarian sector. So this is actually my this is my journey. It's the lower right corner, that's me, in life a little bit more colorful than black and white, I hope. And here my story starts in Ethiopia. It was in 1986 during the Great Famine. I was in the first grader. I learned about famine. I learned about kids were hungry, and I was determined to start working on that problem. So when my fellow first graders want to become a police officer, a baker, or a hairdresser, I wanted to work to solve the world food problem. And in 1996, I set foot on the ground first time working with an NGO in Mauritania. And why I'm mentioning this is that we're all used now to technology, and innovation is a no-brainer. But at my time in Mauritania, 1996, I was communicating with my parents with a fax machine. That's why I put it in the upper corner. A fax, telling my mom and dad that everything was all right. And now we're so accustomed to technology, to APIs and all our words that we're using. But just mind you, I don't consider myself very old. And hopefully very young still, but we have seen a decade or 2 decades where technology has really brought us abilities to change and make system change possible in the way we operate. Right after Mauritania, I went to uni. I became literally a master in disaster and started work in humanitarian assistance, joined MSF, Doctors Without Borders, for many years. In 2010, I became intrigued on data-driven technology and innovation, and that's where my journey a little bit started. I wanted to give some perspective. So if you look at the current crisis in Syria, and we look at the needs that are there. So for me, innovation and aid is an absolute no-brainer. We just have to be smarter, faster, and cheaper the way we operate. So if you look at Syria, these are data from UNOCHA. Currently, or for this year, it was estimated and planned and budgeted that there was 6 billion required to meet the absolute dire needs for the humanitarian crisis taking place in Syria. Up to today, and I just checked the figures, it's half November, we've only been able to cover 2 billion, which is 34% coverage of the funding requirements needed to meet the needs that are there in Syria. And if you think it's a strange figure because it's COVID's year, but look back at the year. So in 2019, it was 42%. It's a trend. It's what you see happening all the time. So for me, it's critical. Innovation is a no-brainer, and we have to look at system change. So this image doesn't want to put an image on how we operate, but imagine you as an innovator. You have your next big thing. You have found the round wheel. But you have to chase organization after the other to get your solution adopted or get it implemented or make people aware of it. But if you know there's 10 million NGOs in the world, all right, 1 million in India, but still 9 million outside of India, you know, it's the way we're trying to look at scaling innovation is a very hard way. And also maybe there are situations where that square wheel is not such a bad idea. Maybe you're going downhill in a very slippy environment. Then a square wheel might be your case. So as long as you're not aware of who to address and who to bring your solution to scale, as well as you don't know contextual situation and the criteria that are required to adopt your solution, that's where our solution comes in. So as you saw in the video, Solvos is a platform. It's an e-procurement platform for the sector with an integrated solution catalog. And to put numbers back into this story, the aid sector itself has an annual spend of about 450 billion, which is probably an underestimate because figures of private donors and private funding entities are often not public. And the platform facilitates efficient, effective, accountable, and responsible procurement. For those that are working in the sector, we know that localization is a big topic, and Solvos enables the localization of procurement and supply chains, trying to make our supply chains more based locally by inviting local suppliers equally to international suppliers, and also organize our logistics locally where possible. Solvos allows to search for a solution on an identified need in a certain context, and it's based on expert knowledge. So our solutions catalog, which I will go to next. This is the platform you saw in a little video, but then in a little drawing. So this whole left component, we call it some sort of a Wikipedia for the aid industry, which is our solutions database. The user comes in, he has a certain need. Maybe he needs a generator because he's building an outpatient clinic in Uganda. Instead of providing a list of generators, Solvos will help them to identify the use case that is associated to that need of the user. In this case, it would be, are you looking for a power supply? What kind of power supply will be the next question? A community, facility, a household power supply. And for each identified use case, criteria associated to that specific use case will be presented vis-a-vis contextual criteria. Then it will be offering you a list of solution packages, which is a combination of services, designs, and services, products, and designs. So this whole component is open access, is free for everybody to access. And then the good news, we're launching in December worldwide. So it's a very big announcement that I can make. Then the other side of our platform, it's a tender platform, which is the SaaS-based subscription. A user can select his or her solutions, launch a tender, and that's the SaaS platform. Normally it takes up to three weeks, more or less, if you're in the field, and you have to build your tender dossier. This part is only taking up 1.5 hour max to generate your tender. Invite local and international suppliers to bid and have more effective and responsible solutions. Almost to the end, just some screenshots. This is the homepage. You can search by category, search by keywords. You can have even your own solutions catalog, or you can cooperate within your organization or build your own solution packages. Some screenshots of use cases. The upper one, a user was looking for a hand washing station, which is part of hygiene and disinfection and prevention infection control. It would tell you there's prerequisites. Just as an example, a hand washing station has as a prerequisite, there's clean water available. If that isn't available, there's then a solution you can add to your solution package to build up your full solution. And here somebody's looking for a product, aprons, and it has all the relevant criteria associated. Then also experts around the world can continue and build up the community database by adding solutions, build upon criteria, etc. And this is when you're preparing for tendering and you can launch your tender. I will skip the impact because I'm talking too long. And yes, we're looking for partners because that was also one of the things I think which is great of this hub, is that you can look and ask for partners and collaborate for impact. So what we see, Solvos is a technical ecosystem, it's an infrastructure, but it's up to our partners and those in the landscape that we can collaborate with in order to make the system change possible. So this is where you might see yourself in. And I'm open to lots of questions if you have them. And I hope I was in time. Sorry, I tend to talk too much.
Thanks, Claire. I actually was too eager to get to your presentation and I forgot a couple of things before switching to the next speaker. The Startup Tuesday event is this event series in The Hague to put a spotlight on entrepreneurship in The Hague and founders and their stories. And we as a Humanity Hub, we are participating in this because successful entrepreneurship is also possible in the humanitarian and peace and justice sector. The proof is tonight with our speakers, and we want to put the spotlight on that. So that is the Startup Tuesday series. And one more thing about the Zoom etiquette that I wanted to mention. Well, you're part of the Zoom call. You all are familiar with it probably. This time it's a bit different. People can share, you can share your video. Please do that if you want. You're not obligated to do it. Stay muted. And please prepare already a few questions. You can already put them in the chat. You can keep them in mind for later on. There will be plenty of time for this interaction. So thank you, Claire, for your first presentation. And now let's switch to Emma from AI ID.
Thanks very much. Right, I'm just going to share my screen. I'm just going to put it into the presentation mode, so just let me know if this works.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you see that okay?
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emma Lindley. I'm Managing Director for a company called AI ID, and we're based at the Humanities Hub. I am based in the UK, though. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today, just got a few slides to talk you through what we do as an organisation, the problem that we are trying to solve. And then also how we as an organisation want to collaborate with the community within the Humanities Hub, and also with partnerships and NGOs on the ground. So just gonna come to the next slide. So what is the problem that we are trying to solve? Well, there are 1.1 billion people globally who are unable to prove their identity for inclusion. Now, for most of us that are on the call, that seems something that we can't even imagine. And when I say that they can't prove their identity globally, I'm not just saying that they have, they perhaps don't have, a passport or a driving license or an identity card. They actually have no identity information whatsoever. So that includes things like birth certificates or any type of documentation that they would use to prove their identity. Now, again, as I say, for some of us that may seem something that we can't imagine, but the impact of that means that those people cannot actually get access to lots of different types of services, from financial services to healthcare to education. And that really has a huge impact on those people and on their lives. And now when we think about, moving forward into the digital world, one of the ways in which that problem can be solved is through the use of biometrics. So what we would do is take somebody's biometric, enroll them into a biometric system, and then they could use that biometric as an ongoing proof of their identity if there's a biometric framework in place. Now, there are lots of implications and lots of concerns about that from a privacy and also a security perspective. And that's where we as an organization, AI for ID, our technology is powered by a technology called Trust Stamp. And we have found a methodology to solve this problem in a way that both protects people's privacy and also secures that data in environments right in the last mile, in an environment where perhaps it's an offline device, where perhaps the user doesn't even have their own device, they're using an agent network, or perhaps it's an NGO that's doing the enrollment. And that's really where our solution comes in. I'm going to talk about this briefly and how it works, but essentially the user can take a secure selfie, and that could be taken by another individual if the user doesn't have a device. And our technology works on the most basic devices, smartphones and tablets. And this is a micro video, or it can be a still image, and this can be done online or offline. So certainly works within those offline environments in last mile scenarios. What we do is we check that to check that it's a real person. We do some proof of life and anti-fraud checks. And then we turn that, this is the really interesting part, we turn that, what would be a biometric, highly sensitive piece of data, we turn that into what we call an irreversibly tokenized identity. And that's a very, very small piece of data. But what it means that from a security perspective, it can't be reversed back. If it's ever lost or stolen or breached or anything like that, like our passwords and usernames have been, it actually is not usable to any type of attacker. So it's not usable unless it's out inside of the network in which our algorithms are used. And also it protects the user's privacy as well. The token can then be deduplicated against a database of tokens, or it can be saved onto a QR code or smart code and given to the user in an offline environment. And essentially what it does is it allows us to go, have we seen this face before? Have we seen this palm before? Have we seen this fingerprint before? But we do that in a way that's privacy protecting and also secure. So what are the reasons in which we do this? Well, helping organizations with the identity technology to reduce fraud, and also to break biometric lock-in within a lot of emerging markets. It's a real issue that governments and NGOs get locked into particular biometric vendors, and we can break that vendor lock-in because we actually act as a translation layer between technologies. We protect that personal data, we increase efficiency, improve inclusion, because everybody can have one of these tokenized identities, and we increase data privacy, which is super important. So just a little bit about us. AIID is a public benefit corporation, so we're working in the boundaries and between public-private partnerships. We're very much focused on inclusion. We see our success through partnerships. We are a technology provider, so very much we are looking to work with NGOs and organizations who are, executing on the ground. And we see our success through those partnerships. And essentially it's universal by design. So it's allowing the technology to be used within those environments and in those last mile scenarios. Just really quickly, just before I run out of time, why I have been involved in this. So I've actually been in the identity industry for about 18 years. And as I've worked within the technology industry, I've becoming, more and more found that inclusion is extremely important, because we have problems with identity inclusion even in places like the UK. And also privacy and security. I'm also a co-founder of a non-profit called Women in Identity. So that's very much focused on trying to get more women into the field of digital identity and this type of technology. Because one of the things that we know about identity, particularly in the context of financial services. So the World Bank, their stats say that 42% of women are unbanked, and that's in comparison to 35% of men. And 1 in 6 of those women say it's a lack of documentation that allows them to get identified and then get access to financial services. So it has a really big impact, lack of identity, particularly on women and girls. And then that lack of identity has an impact on financial inclusion. It has an impact on education. It has an impact on what they can do for their children. So that's why I got involved in this field. That's why I'm particularly involved in the technology. And that's why we're looking to partner with organizations in this area. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you for your presentation. Let's switch to another person in the UK right now, Alex Kalle. You're still muted, Alex.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Just checking everyone can see my screen. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name's Alex Kalle. I'm the Managing Director of Loop, a new charity that's registered in The Hague, but its sole purpose is to provide a global digital feedback service. So the problem that we're trying to fix compared to the other two presentations earlier today is that in the humanitarian and the development sector is the only sector where the same people assess the needs, deliver and respond to those needs that were identified, and then report back on them about how the needs were met and how effective that was. And so Loop is an independent digital global platform which people can use to feedback. So this is a little bit of an overview of what Loop looks like. You can feedback through a number of different mechanisms. You can filter stories as a little bit of a hybrid between social media that we're all used to, and having that open, transparent engagement on feedback from local populations. So it's accessible, it's real time. Feedback is open and transparent, and it's a global, independent, and can be anonymized tool for saying thank you and feeding back on a service and asking questions, but also reporting abuse that might be taking place. You can access Loop through many different technologies. So through, you can access Loop by using free messenger services, text messages, online, if you have access to the internet directly. We want to build on voice interactive technology, have translation in many different languages, and really make it reduce the barriers that there are for people who receive humanitarian or development aid to feedback on it in an open, transparent way, and to report in a safe, independent way as well, for there to be action as a result. So where are we so far? We have a very strong representative governing board who come from affected populations. We also have an advisory board of people who come from different parts of the sector to help ensure that Loop is integrated with and adds value to other systems that are out there at the moment. We've raised some funds to build out other aspects of Loop in the coming year. We've developed our minimal viable product in English and to access through the internet this year in the Philippines and Zambia through networks of local civil society organizations on the ground. And they've helped us to design it in a way that would add value to their context. And in 2021, we want to build on those further, build on additional elements. And we will be starting in Somalia scoping, and hopefully there's discussions in potentially Yemen, Nepal, and we'll see where else it takes us in 2021. But we're very open to learning, to partnering with different actors, private sector, civil society organizations, NGOs, UN, tech companies, all to really help us to get to scale with a solution like this. So I was asked to also talk a little bit about the journey and the experience so far. I think when I started on this journey in April this year, I really felt like, right, but already all of the reports consistently saying that we need a system like this, that the gap is enormous. We're committed to the participation revolution, and shifting the power structures in the system. But when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, I think there's still some resistance and a need to work a lot on building trust and evidence around a tool like this and the impact that that can have positively on all different actors across the sector. Raising social impact funds is a completely new world for me. It's something that I don't have a lot of experience on and that you don't see a lot of women in. So I've really been learning around that and hope to grow that element in 2021. But then my experience has also been having a governing board of people who come from affected countries and the massive challenges just in the systems and the way that we're organised for them to be able to have the oversight and some of the very tactical issues that raises. I've done a blog around that, but that's been quite eye-opening for me. About identity again came into that, and a number of different blockers for them to be overseeing the finances and the structure of the organisation, and they'd experienced that on a number of bases, a number of different levels. So that was very interesting. Obviously, starting in April when COVID hit wasn't the easiest of times, and not being able to come and meet people like yourselves in person. But I think it's also, there's been a positive in that the question of why use technology, we should be talking to people face to face and be beside people, that question no longer occurs anymore. I think the new normal is very much that technology is the solution and does provide opportunities, just like Claire was saying, that we need to be using those tools to help and deliver better for people who are affected. So yeah, that's the end of my little introduction. Happy to answer any questions and start the discussion.
Thank you very much, Alex. Let me just juggle quickly with the view. I think right now you see me, but I don't want to monopolize the view. So for this next part, I would like to turn the concept of an event on its head. It's not a panel with an audience. It's very much a conversation, and the conversation will be kicked off by me with the three speakers you just heard. But I would like to involve you participants as well into it in different ways. Some of you have your videos on already. Thanks a lot. If you have a question, if you have a theme or a topic that is fitting to this conversation that you would like to address and participate in the conversation, so basically join us. Feel free to write that in the chat. So just say who you are, just name, organization, and the theme, and then I will invite you to join us in the conversation. Or if you prefer, just type your question, go the old-fashioned way. In the chat, and I will also pick it from there. So please feel free to do this. And in the meantime, Emma and Alex and Claire, a few questions prepared from my side. You mentioned all three of you, and I think I still have to change the view right now. I think all of you see me, but let's see if you can see something else. 1 second, please. I think you have to, on your own, go to the view and select the view of the grid view, basically. So Emma, Claire, and Alex, you all mentioned, that you desire, that you want to partner, collaborate from different perspectives. I think Emma is very much from a tech solution perspective. Claire from a middle person or connecting. Providing the sort of a framework for that to happen, and in a way, Alex as well, providing a solution. So how can one collaborate with you, considering also the diverse projects that were just presented tonight? Maybe Claire, you want to start, or Alex?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go. I think that none of us, the problems are so large and so broad scale. Nobody here and their organisation can solve some of the issues that there are out there. I mean, I see Pina from Upinion, and they're doing some great work on surveys and collecting data. There is so much that we need to work together to build off each other's learning, the sort of open source technology, and using that as a framework also for networking and working with each other and to try to find solutions. to these very complex and ingrained issues. It's just about understanding each other's work, each other's offer, and really being as open as possible. So that would be my input.
I can't agree more. So the problems are too big to solve alone. And if I'm looking at partnerships for Solvos, if I'm going to zoom in now, for us, there's many different ways to collaborate. And what Solvos is all about is that we have to open up knowledge. So there's 10 million NGOs and 18% of them are international. Some of them have extremely, they're very focused in a certain domain. For example, we all know Oxfam as in water and sanitation. But knowledge often stays within one organization, and that's where we're standing for. So there's one side of Solvos is opening up knowledge and expertise, the standard operating procedures. So knowing that there's a humanitarian in all of us, and we should also all have access to that knowledge to do our utmost best to make a change possible in the sector. And the other component of Solvos is opening up the markets. So that's where we're looking for partners. I just drafted a proposal with all these vaccine news coming out. They have to be stored at -80 and the last one -80, but they can survive at -20. That means there's a lot of logistics to be organized. So I'm drafting a project proposal with some relevant parties to open up knowledge for mass vaccination campaign around logistics, etc. So if you're a knowledge expert or your organization is, and you'd like to contribute to open access knowledge, that's one way to partner. Or if you're all about the markets, or if you're an entrepreneur and you might like to make your innovation visible, that's also how you can partner. So there's multiple different levels.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, you know, we have tried to make our technology as flexible as possible so that we can, you know, do a proportion of the journey. So we do develop our own biometrics as well as the privacy enhancing piece. The other thing that we do is we can just do the privacy enhancing piece on its own. And what that enables organizations to do is, and I think, you know, particularly in a lot of these contexts, if they already have existing solutions in place, I think what we're trying to do is say to them, you don't have to go and rip and replace, you know, all of that expense that you might have put in place, but what you can do is add this privacy protecting layer. So I'd echo, you know, what's been said before is I truly believe that this is not a winner takes all, you know, play for any organization that's trying to work in this space. I think you have to be very, very clear about, you know, where your part starts and where it stops, and then how you're prepared to collaborate within the space. And we're working with lots of organizations, you know, already, both in the public sector and the private sector. You know, I mean, one of our clients is MasterCard. And we've become a very small part of their larger solution that they're talking to a number of NGOs about. And I think that's, you know, I think it's really important, you know, to work with larger organizations as well as being prepared to work with smaller ones as well.
Thank you, Emma. If I may just add to what you said, all three of you. So we're sharing this very diverse ecosystem in The Hague with you know, a very vibrant impact startup scene. And not a few weeks ago, a founder of a specific you know, solution to filter water reached out to me, and you know, a great startup founder, and very interested in collaborating with the nonprofit sector because his solution is directly related or can directly benefit crisis zones. So and he was basically saying that he finds it very difficult to offer this solution to this humanitarian aid world, and I'm wondering specifically, Alex and Claire, because you have tremendous experience there, but also maybe Emma, from your perspective as someone looking for partnership within this world, how can that be facilitated? How can these, you know, people that want to change the world with their solutions, their tech solutions, how can they get into that world?
I think to make meaningful, I was waiting for Alex, sorry. Yeah, make meaningful connections. Make sure, and that I'm preaching for the same choir maybe as Alex. Make sure you understand the contextual situation. And one solution might be brilliant, life-changing, page turner in one location, but it could be completely irrelevant or even offensive in another one. So be aware that it's not, the sector are no guinea pigs. It is not something that if you like to do good, it's good enough to do good. No, do no harm and make sure you understand the situation. That's critical. And then make connections, make sure you know the persons and you know the problem you're addressing. So don't come in and tell, I found my solution for this problem, while you don't even know if that problem really occurs or is happening in a certain location. So yeah, that would be my 50 cents. And then make sure you're connected. Make sure that people know that you're out there, and don't be set off if you're approaching one organization and you've given a no. Make sure that you are aware that one international aid agency has offices all around the globe, and in each office, each person works in a certain department and might not have the power to say yes or no, or might not be interested. While his colleague in another country might be interested. So if one aid agency tells you no, it doesn't mean that for complete organization will be a no-go for you. So make an analysis of the person you need to address, the organization, where they are based, and what you're trying to solve in a certain context. Alex, I'll keep.
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess I've seen over the last 10, 15 years, a lot of discussion about what people call the TripAdvisor for the humanitarian sector. And it's been started sort of 3 or 4 different times, and every time it's failed. And not because the whole overarching wish to the gap wasn't correctly identified, or the problem wasn't clear enough, but I think that there were very important subtleties that were absolute red lines that meant that those solutions then didn't work in the longer run, or for a significant or a sufficiently large enough portion of the actors in the sector. So I mean, the philosophy of Loop is about feeding back and listening and hearing from local actors and empowering them and seeing what roles, their experiences, and how that can be so different from our own, and really putting that at the center of solutions.
Emma, would you like to add from your perspective as well?
I mean, it's already been said, but I think it is starting with what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and I think one of the challenges is sometimes, and I think Claire touched on it, the solution that you have might not solve the problem, or they might be able to solve it in a completely different way, and that's okay, because it's all of these things, and particularly when I think about identity, it's completely contextual and cultural to that particular use case and that particular organization or that particular country. And so, I think coming with perhaps a, solution-led approach, you have to very much just go user-led, and you have to really get an understanding of what the problem is that you're trying to solve, or working with organizations in that particular context or use case or country that are solving a problem, and then understanding how your technology might fit within their infrastructure if they're already solving a problem.
Thanks, Emma. I see there's some conversation going on in the chat. That's fantastic. And Claire, you answered already a question. That's great. Feel free as well to raise a hand metaphorically or join the conversation. I see that Rishi Sukul had some great suggestions from Alex from our Loop. So feel free to have a look at this as well and keep asking your questions in the chat. Emma, I want to stick with you for a second, because here you are with the this very innovative tech solution. I'm wondering how, over the last few years, we've seen quite a few large partnerships between aid organizations and and specific tech companies. And that always raises a question of the responsibility and the responsible innovation around it, what impact it has on the specific users in that case of these innovations. How do you ensure well, that it's responsible and well, accountability with your solution, Emma?
So I think that's, I mean, it's a great question. And there are a number of ways in which we think about that as an organisation. I mean, we've written our own, there are a number of principles that have been written up by the World Bank, by the Good ID board, they are funded by Omidyar Network. So I actually sit on the editorial board for their content of Good ID, but they have their own set of principles. We also, as an organisation, have our own set of code of conduct and ethics and principles. And so I think the other thing I would say is in the identity community, there are a number of sets of standards coming out in this area. So in relation to ethics and bias. So I think it's one of those things that I would say isn't, if you are working in a country where perhaps, if we take Africa as a continent, about half of the countries in Africa have privacy regulations, about half don't. And I think it's important to say, well, we are going to set the benchmark as an organisation about what we would do and what we would not do. And there are privacy regulations like GDPR, so there are worldwide benchmarks for those types of things, and I think you have to set the standards high. I think as things evolve, there will be more standards. I'm seeing more standards coming out of ISO. I'm seeing more standards come out of NIST in relation to things like bias being baked into biometric systems, but it's an evolving area. It's not something that you can just pick up and and it's been pieced together from lots of places like the World Bank, but that's how we do it. Other organizations will do it differently.
Thank you, Emma. Claire, Alex, feel free also to react if you want to the theme of responsible innovation, if you want.
Yeah, I think that people should be aware that there are a lot of standards and set up in the sector, which are known maybe if you're operating, like for example, Sphere, that there are minimum standards being developed. So if you're in a certain subdomain, imagine sanitation, be aware that there are minimum standards, both in the sector itself, one toilet for every 20 persons, for example, so are very numeric, but also cross certain domains, so cross-cutting themes. There are a lot of standards you need to take into consideration or make sure that you are aware of them. For example, the size of the door for disability purposes, etc.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, I just add on to what Emma was saying as well, that standards exist, and we're hoping we want to aim high. So why would we have a standard for European citizens that we wouldn't expect to be the same standard for every other citizen on the globe? That those are just equality requirements, and that's what we'll be basing ourselves on.
That's a great point, Alex. We're very lucky in the European Union. I'm gonna do something I like to do. Is we have some other hub members with us today. I see Pinar from European, I see Alex, another Alex from Space for Good. Feel free to also join the conversation. I know that you have, I'm sure, some questions buzzing in your head. For the three speakers, you mentioned, Claire, you mentioned at the beginning in your presentation a system change, and part of the reason why you're doing what you do. A question to all three of you. So this year is still crazy, changed so many things. It's also an opportunity in some ways to I think some people call it build back better. I'm not sure if I like this formulation, but what can we do right now to get to that better system, for innovation, for implementing these solutions for, well, for making this world a better place. Do you want to share a few thoughts on that?
Pinar, are you?
Yeah, well, hello. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you all three for the very inspiring and interesting presentations. And it's nice to hear indeed what is all happening in what you're saying, Alex, to make this world a better place. Maybe just on your question on how we can do that, and I think we're already doing very much so, is in seeking, and it has been said also by Claire, in seeking, and by Alex and Emma also in seeking this collaboration with these different sectors. And that also comes back a bit to the question about how can we do this responsible, especially if you're working with tech sectors. How can you ensure that the responsible data and how what you're acting is now not harming anyone? I think there's also something to learn from these tech sectors or private sectors that we're collaborating, as you have also standards for these sectors. And that can be applied. It doesn't mean that the tech sector is only harmful in that sense. They have also guidance and principles on how to protect profiles, how to protect identity, how to protect data. So I think from that, it's actually good to have that conversation open and to see what can be achieved. Also, just I wanted to chip in on, I think also on Claire and also what Alex was saying, you know, there's a need for the solutions that are being brought, and that's not for nothing. Like Alex said, the rhetoric is there, but the resistance is there as well. I'll type it into the chat. There's also something that is called Disrupt Development, and I don't know if you've heard of this. This I think is being led also by AIDS Funds. I know at least one person from AIDS Funds who is doing that, which is also bringing offbeat multimedia content to inspire and bring about systemic change in the development, cooperation, and humanitarian aid. And I think it will also be a nice platform maybe to bring together our solutions and to be more visible, Claire, as you suggested. So I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying. I'm kind of trying to get all the things that were discussed and putting it all out in one comment. But I think there is a place where there are places where we can connect more and find each other more and have these conversations open about building back better. And also how we can do this responsibly. So that was just something that I wanted to say and keep on going. It's really inspiring to see what you're all doing.
Thanks, Pinar, for allowing the spotlight on you. Alex, Emma, Claire, any reaction as well to this question?
So for me, this year hasn't just been about COVID, it's also been about global warming and the fires raging and the Black Lives Matter movement. And to me, all of that is pushing a really, really important conversation around colonization and power distribution and equity across the sector. And I think the humanitarian and the development sector really should be leading the charge on this. And I think there's an opportunity for us to take these discussions that are now coming, really being prioritized and seen as important for societal changes, but to take that and create those shifts and using technology and new power to distribute, hear from local people, but also distribute opportunities like localization and employing more local people and things like that. So I do see that it's been a very unusual year, but there are opportunities to address some of the inequalities that are maintaining the scale of the needs that are there globally.
Yeah, there's a little, my 50 cents to add here without copying the others. Is I also think that this whole technology infrastructure has made us more ready than ever to share what we're doing. And I think all the open designs in the makers community, for example, is an amazing opportunity that can make local production possible of aid supplies that normally are shipped in. And I think what you have seen happening in the first few months of all the maker spaces that got together and were designing in open maker spaces communities, face masks or shields, etc. that can then be shared constructively around in the entire globe, where I see Field Ready. If you're not familiar with them, please check them out. They're building now also a map where you can see where is the next printing station, where you as an entrepreneur locally can start crafting your own supplies and then do things better locally. And I think that's something that has been a catalyst during COVID, especially because flights were grounded and the majority of aid supplies are going in the bulk of charter planes, not in charter planes, but in passenger flights. So this whole supply chain was collapsed. So technology is more ready than ever to share what we're doing. And yeah, I'm just super happy to see so many great things happening.
Yeah, do you want me to add? I've just got one thing to add just from my perspective. I think what we have seen, you know, in the development sector, you know, in the government sector, in even in developed markets like the UK, is this real push towards digital transactions as a result of COVID. It has been a real accelerator, and I think now more than any time ever, privacy is so important. Like it really is. And I think being able to the fact that you can bake that into technology, it really does have to be done. The security and the privacy. Fraud is increasing and has increased everywhere as a result of COVID. And I think I think what we're seeing is there's a real rush towards governments perhaps having identity systems, and in that rush there is the risk of them putting systems in place that don't necessarily have the safeguards that we would want to have in place for people. And so I think for us, that's been one of the things that we've really been focused on is kind of saying it is possible to build these systems without actually impacting users' privacy and security.
Thank you, Emma. Again, I see that quite a few questions are being answered directly by the speakers in the chat. So I'm running out of questions in that sense. I see we also have Rishi here from Space for Good, yet another hub member, asking how to deal with conflicting interests of regimes related to privacy. The previous regime in Ethiopia liked to get their hands on all communication, perhaps not getting involved. I think this has been answered already, but if not, give the chance to Claire or anyone else to answer that. I think it's time. It's been 1 hour, but let's not cut it here if it's okay with you. I think we're having a great conversation so far. So if you still have questions, please put them in the chat. I have my favorite question I want to ask before finishing from my side, which is pretty much what is this one thing that people always get wrong about what you do, your work? And maybe let's just start with Emma, because that's you just in front of me.
What's the one thing that I mean, I think it is the assumption that that we are assuming that technology is the answer, and so I think yeah, I think also assuming, because there are so many biometric systems out there that don't have any kind of privacy baked in, I think people assume that our technology is the same. I think there's a real, there is a, addressing the elephant in the room, there is a real concern around biometric technologies. And I think that there are some implementations of biometric technologies that are not good for potentially for people's privacy, potentially people's human rights. So I think one of the challenges we have is that we get lumped in with all of those other organisations, and that's one of our biggest challenges, I think.
Alex, what is something that people always get wrong about you, about your work?
So I think that there's two elements. One is that loop is about open, transparent engagement and discussion. And a lot of the approach to this date is monitoring and evaluation or surveys which are within a specific organisation, maybe a specific group of actors or a specific project. And so it's very focused with structured listening and feedback mechanisms. The other one is that the outlying cases where, you know, these 10 people won't have access to this technology or to this approach, and therefore why should you start? Because you're not available and delivering for everybody equally. But I mean, with technology, you need to start somewhere, you iterate, you build, you learn, and we're all collectively, I mean, how many people are working on the digital divide and trying to make sure that that doesn't create greater inequalities? And it's about joining that collectively and yeah, iterating, which is, you know, what we can take from the tech sector and do a little bit better in the humanitarian sector, maybe.
Thanks, Alex. Claire, what do people get wrong about your work?
I find it an interesting question. I think by default, if you mention that you're a humanitarian, people always assume that it's good what you're doing, and whatever you do is good because you do it for a humanitarian purpose. And yeah, that's what I always say. It's just not good enough to do good. There should be way more behind it. And everybody always responds immediately back with a niece or a nephew has been working in an orphanage somewhere. And that's sometimes really hard to then professionalize the conversation back to the real core problems that needs to be solved, that needs all of us. Yeah, and the other thing is probably a lot of people try to see Solvos as a product where it's actually tackling the major problems in the whole system. So it's very complicated to explain every single bit of Solvos if you don't understand the systems and the structures behind it, even up to the way we're funding agencies that are actually posting regulations and the ways of working, that you actually like to blame an aid agency that is doing something in a certain way, but they're only doing so because they're obliged to do so for reporting or being a part of the current system. And that's very hard to explain, even in a few minutes. And even now I'm struggling.
Thank you, Claire, for answering this. Adrian has been asking fantastic questions, and his latest is quite long, so I'm going to read it. Many NGOs face difficulties with financing due to de-risking. When banks use anti-money laundering and terrorist financing regulations to block the transactions or accounts, if the funds go to a high-risk area, how can we increase the confidence of the financial institutions to change it? If there are countries on a blacklist such as Syria, which are the alternatives? I'm wondering who of you three could maybe answer this. Maybe someone else within the participants could answer this question. Maybe even scope it from a different perspective if you wish.
I'd like to give it a shot. And I think it's all due to transparency and accountability. And most often there's not a full country that's blacklisted. It's certain activities in a country that is blacklisted. So even in Syria might be blacklisted on certain lists, still it doesn't prevent WHO to run a malaria campaign or the World Food Program to run nutritional programs. So it's always part of certain transactions and certain entities. So there needs to be a rigorous check on those that are buying as well as those are supplying, and be open and transparent without harming the beneficiaries. Please, Adrian, you potentially have more to say on this as well.
Feel free to jump in, Adrian, if you want. Emma or Alex, if you want to react, feel free as well. Otherwise, I'm going to suggest, so it's a bit over time right now. Rishi is writing, I think, yeah, answering the question. I would like to just officially wrap it up. And Claire had a suggestion of keeping this open, the Zoom, for whoever wants to continue a conversation around, well, I think Claire would stay in that case, but maybe others, and interact directly without my moderation in between. So I officially would like to thank the three speakers tonight, Emma, Claire, and Alex, for taking your time to do this. I think this was very interesting. Thank you to the participants for joining. There's another Startup Tuesday event before the end of this year on the 8th of December. It's actually related to this theme here. It's the finals of the Dutch Coalition for Humanitarian Innovation Humanitarian Challenge. So have a look at this, have a look at the website. And I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's okay to send your slides to all participants later on. We will do this. And yeah, thanks a lot from my side as well. And Claire, you were the one suggesting this. Would you like to keep this Zoom call open?
If anybody wants to hang out, like normally what you do after a social event, there's always a few ones that close the light or close the door. Yeah, I'll hang around if there's any other questions.
The drinks.
Drinks, yes. You have to bring your own drink though.
All right, thank you everyone. I'm going to stick around for a while. Bye, Pinar.